On today's show, it's a mailbag edition of Locked On Capitals where I answer your questions on the Capitals. Next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called the Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, it's a mailbag edition of Locked On Caps as I answer your questions about the Capitals. And there is a lot of questions surrounding this team about what additions need to be made, what players could be on the move, and the transition of power. As Alex Ovechkin has 1 season remaining under his current contract, that there is going to be a change. Are the Capitals ready for that? I know that it seems like a foregone conclusion that Tom Wilson is the heir apparent as the next captain. But what about players like John Carlson that I think that a change is staring this team squarely in the face? How will they overcome? So in this summer edition of Locked On Capitals, that's what I'm going to do is talk to you about your questions, answer them, in my opinion, about the future of this team and kind of just the state of the Capitals. So let's just dive into it. First up, Rachel from Arlington asks, with Nic Dowd re-signed and the center depth mostly set, where do the Capitals look to upgrade this summer? And you take a look at it, that was one of the players that I wanted the Capitals to address as far as an extension is concerned, that Nic Dowd is a key piece on that Capitals fourth line. And it doesn't really matter who he's surrounded by, that he is the constant, that, we've seen different players cycle through, that he is that one constant that really gets the most and the leader on that fourth line. But the center position is not completely buttoned up in my estimation. I think that there still is questions about the third line center position. For example, we know that Lars Eller most likely will not be back, almost 100% for sure, not back on the Capitals next season. So the questions remain on who is going to take on that role. I think that internal options like Connor McMichael and Henrik Slapierre. But do the Capitals want to take a big hack like Chris Patrick talked about? And if they're going to take a big hack, it's going to be a really big hack, he said, and address it. Now, it gets a little bit complicated in the regard of that they want to stay under cap. And is there going to be a trade involved? Is it going to happen before July? Those kind of things. So it is going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. But with Strome, Dubois, McMichael, Dowd, and even Protas able to play center, potentially the group's in a pretty good spot, all things considered, except, like I said, the third line center position. The real need is on wing, specifically a middle 6 forward who can add scoring punch. Beauvillier and Duhaime are solid depth options, but the team needs a 20-goal guy to balance the top 9 and reduce the load on Ovechkin. And we did see players put up career numbers, but one of the things that got drawn into focus in the playoffs was it seemed like this team was in a pretty good position during the regular season. I guess I didn't really see in my crystal ball the Capitals collapsing the way they did in the second round, but I think they need a proven performer, one player that has some playoff experience and a deep playoff experience. And that is one of the things that's been said about the Capitals is not a battle-tested team. And I think that was one of the things that got drawn into focus. Next, we'll go to Trevor from College Park, and he wants to know, could the Capitals target someone like Matt Duchene or Brad Marchand in free agency. And it's interesting he brings those up. That is two players that I'm going to talk about in an upcoming episode. I was talking with Trevor about that. He was commenting back and forth. And Matt Duchene or Brad Marchand, I think those are interesting names. Duchene makes sense. He's versatile and still quick, and he'd help the power play and 5-on-5 scoring. Marchand is still battling in the playoffs with Florida, and while he'd bring skill and grit, his cap hit and age might make that a tough fit. If the team wants offense without long-term risk, Duchene seems a bit more realistic, in my opinion. But, it depends on the Capitals' tactic and how they want to go about this. Alex Ovechkin is under contract next season, which I referenced. Do they want to push all their chips in on kind of one last ditch effort to win a Stanley Cup while he's here? That, a name like Brad Marchand might seem like kind of crazy. He is a guy that knows how to play on the big stage, and kind of a little bit like Tom Wilson, that if you live outside of DC, or say you're not a Capitals fan, you don't like Tom Wilson. But if you are a Capitals fan, you sing the praises of Tom Wilson. I think Brad Marchand kind of fits in that category. That I think a lot of people don't like him around the NHL, but ask a Boston fan, ask a Florida fan. I think most of them like Brad Marchand's brand. But you take a look at a Duchene or Brad Marchand would be excellent options. I believe that, like a one-term deal, push all your chips into the center of the table to try to win a cup. That we need proven performers. Because you take a look at it, the players, there were some great players on this team this past season. But, the further we get away from this past season, there's some players that, my heart's not going to be broken if, for example, Mangiapane doesn't come back, if Radish doesn't come back. And, so if, with those kind of, mediocre, lackluster milquetoast players, if they move on, it's not the end of the world. If they could really bolster this team in the way that, like the Florida Panthers or the Oilers, or, the Stars, these teams that are playing well in the playoffs, then I think that we could be in a conversation about this team making a deep push, or dare I say a Stanley Cup win. So it's going to be interesting to see how aggressive they plan on getting. That is one of the questions they asked Chris Patrick. He said, you plan on the Capitals taking a hack this summer? And he said, maybe a big hack, but it'll be interesting to see how that manifests itself. So next here, Melissa from Alexandria asks, how safe is the goaltending tandem of Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson? I love talking about netminding. I think that Logan Thompson was a good fit. I don't know, distancing myself a bit further from his contract extension, if that was the right idea to sign him to that lengthy of a contract. But all things considered, I would say that it is a serviceable goalie tandem. But I'm going to be honest to say, I don't think that Logan Thompson or Charlie Lindgren is elite. They're good, but they're not elite. And it was one of the things that got kind of drawn into focus in the latter part of the season when Logan Thompson got injured was, what is this going to mean if Charlie Lindgren is the guy? We like him. He's a nice person, and, a pretty good netminder, but is he going to be able to defend and play at an elite level against the Carolina Hurricanes? And to be clear here, the Capitals didn't lose the second round because of Logan Thompson. He made some really great saves. I feel confident. I guess I would feel a bit more confident if they had a really lights out number 3. And I know that that's been Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson, but they don't have a lot of hockey miles on their hockey odometer at the NHL level that, you saw Clay Stevenson get called up. You've seen Hunter Shepard get called up. That when it's their time to shine, are they ready to shine? So all things considered, I feel pretty good about Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren for the long term. But is there a better option? You could live in that land of, okay, there's always a better option. I don't have any, I'll put it to you like this. I don't have any feeling like it's something that the Capitals need to go out and address. Like Logan Thompson wasn't good enough. And I think it's good. I think it's as good as it's going to get right now. The one thing I know about the Capitals is they have a glut of talent in the netminding department for years to come. how much of that will ever be NHL ready? I guess we don't know. I know that LT is signed up for the long term and Charlie Lindgren for more of the midterm length contract there, that I think they're in a good position. And I think that, even listen to some of the beat writers, I'm not going to name names here, they talk about how nice of people they are. And I don't ever really want to enter into that category of, Charlie Lindgren's a nice guy or Logan Thompson's a nice guy. If they're a person, that's a bonus. I want a guy that's going to battle in net, that is going to give the Capitals the absolute best chance at winning a game. And I think that Logan Thompson did that. I don't think the Capitals would have made it to the playoffs had he not been here. It's just that, do I think they're the best option for the Capitals? I think there's probably better options, but I don't want to live in the land of who that could be. For right now, the Capitals pushed all their chips in on Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren, a serviceable tandem that I think will help the Capitals next season. I don't want to go too much further out than that, thinking, where are they going to be 3-4 years from now? I'm not going to go that far ahead. Next season, I feel confident in Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren. And I think that, that tandem put the Capitals in pretty good shape next season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about more of your questions and comments about Ovechkin's legacy, what's next for Leonard, and the next step in a leadership transition. I'll discuss straight ahead. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Now, I know it's easy that in the morning you want to reach for a snack, something that's gonna fill your stomach, but sometimes you reach for the wrong thing. Maybe you reach for a donut or, something that is laced with a lot of sugar. I think that if you could reach to Wonderful Pistachios, you could set your day off on the right foot. Now, personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for days when I'm busy, whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to snack because I'm trying to eat better. And I think you should too. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in shells, I'm going to say, are a classic favorite, one that I reach for. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this episode, it is a mailbag edition answering some of your questions surrounding the Capitals. I'll plan on doing more of these this summer, as sometimes it gets a little bit busy during the regular season, as there is a lot of games and practices and injuries to keep you all updated. This is a time where we can kind of take a breath and kind of dig into some of the questions that you want answered. So let's dive into that in this second segment here. Let's talk about some big picture stuff, starting with a guy who just rewrote history. Derek from Reston asks, now that Ovechkin has officially passed Gretzky, what is next for him? So an interesting thing, and I've seen this question out there quite a bit about, if you can believe it, when are the Capitals going to talk to Ovechkin about an extension? As we know, he has a year left on his contract this next season, and then what's after that? Alex Ovechkin is the kind of guy that lives in the right here, right now, that I think that he doesn't like to look into his crystal ball a little bit. He wants to just think about what is next season. And what he has said about next season when pressed is that he will be playing with the Capitals next season. He will honor the final year of his contract, and he doesn't really give a whole lot of answers after that. My hunch is that he plays his final season, which would be next season, and then he retires from the NHL. Is there the possibility that he plays one season in the KHL? Yeah, listen, anything is possible, but I would also say that I wouldn't be surprised if he just hangs it up altogether. He has got kids, he's got a wife, he's got more money than he knows what to do with. He's caught and passed Gretzky. He's won a Stanley Cup. What else is there left, really? I don't think that he wants to go down in the category of a Jaromir Jagr just trying to beat a dead horse. You don't want to fall into Tom Brady category where you play and you didn't win a trophy, and then you retire and you want to come back, you want to win the Super Bowl. I don't think that with Alex Ovechkin, I don't think that he is going to try to come back for one more season to try to win a Stanley Cup. I just don't think that that's the case. I think that if it happens next season, then I think great, but I don't see him signing an extension just to think to himself, maybe if I come back one more year, maybe I can win a Stanley Cup with this team. And you take a look at it, he's 39, he's going to be 40 next season. So, some people have said a 1 to 2 year deal out there are you going to get the best Ovechkin at 42 years old? And just, a lot of things. I don't want to take away from what he did this last season, put up big numbers, caught and passed Gretzky, but where was he in the playoffs, especially the second round? That I think to a certain extent, we're already kind of starting to see some diminished returns. Next here, Lauren from Bethesda writes, will Ryan Leonard make the team next year? We know that he's done at Boston College, or what is your long-term thoughts on Ryan Leonard? Listen, Ryan Leonard joined the Capitals once Boston College wrapped up their season. He put up back-to-back 30-goal seasons at Boston College. And I think there was the hope out there that he was just going to light the stage on fire. He was going to just light it up on the ice, score a bunch of goals. At the end of the day, he scored one empty netter. But, you take a look at the trajectory, and a lot of these younger players, whether it be Bedard or Macklin, Celebrini, that I think that there is varying trajectory. Some players take to it right away. But one of the things about jumping from college to the NHL is the guys are bigger, they're faster, they're more skilled, that, maybe it was a bit unfair for Ryan Leonard to jump right into the mix, right into playoff hockey. But with that said, also valuable. He got some real great experience playing some hockey that has, a big impact, or the implications of the games have big impact. So I think it was valuable for him. And I think that it's important not to judge what we saw from him, in that brief snippet there too much, to think that that's what kind of player he is, that he's not going to be everything that we had hoped. I just think that, as a brief snippet, I expect him to grow next year. I expect him to be on the roster next year and maybe start him a little bit slower, start him on the third line. And if he excels, hey, one of the things we know about Spencer Carberry is that he is not afraid of tweaking the lineup here and there. So all things considered with Leonard, again, I expect him to be on the team, of course. And let's just see where things go. I expect to see, steps of improvement next season, that he has the history. I think he's got the hockey IQ. He has a lot of tools in his tool set. He's got a great shot, a great skater, and has a little bit of snarl to his game. I think that he's growing into the position. And I think it's, like I said, important not to characterize what kind of player he is just based on that small snippet that we saw from him this past season. Tony from Silver Spring asks, is Tom Wilson the guaranteed next captain once Ovechkin retires? Guaranteed? Well, no, I don't think anything is guaranteed. I think that it is the common thought out there that he will, in fact, be the current captain. Alex Ovechkin, the man himself, thinks that he is. That I think that, if you're a Capitals fan, what he brings to this team. Leadership. He is a good mentor for the younger players, and not afraid of standing up for the younger players. That, he is the sheriff of the team. If you want to get, physical with someone, you're going to answer to the sheriff first. And that is kind of the leadership quality that Tom Wilson has. And, I don't see another player on the team, to be honest with you, that is even close to being in the conversation for being a captain. Is it guaranteed? No, I don't think it's guaranteed, but it's darn near. I'm 99.9% sure that Tom Wilson is going to be the next captain of this team, unless he does something totally crazy. That's what I'm saying. There's always the possibility that, the wheel wobbles and something crazy happens. But like I said, 99.9% sure that Tom Wilson is the next captain. Great goal scorer, just everything I rattled off. He's the complete package. And, again, outside of the DC area, say you're not a Capitals fan, there's a lot of hatred aimed in Tom Wilson's direction. But make no mistake about it, that if he was ever a free agent, or say, that he signed with a team, your favorite team, you would be the first in line to buy his jersey. So I think he brings a lot of intangibles, and I think that it's kind of a formality as far as I'm concerned. I expect that he gets the C on his chest the very moment that Alex Ovechkin hangs up the skates. All right, so coming up here after the break, more of your comments. We'll talk about Protas's rise, trade possibilities, and the playoff outlook straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals on YouTube and leave some comments down below. I sure would appreciate it. So in the final segment here, we're talking about the outlook, Protas, players that stepped up, and what is the future of this team. This is a mailbag edition of Locked On Capitals. So let's talk about that, closing out with some roster dynamics and look ahead. Jasmine from Bowie asks, has Alexei Protas earned a permanent top-line role, or will he be bumped if the Caps add more offense? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Of course, it is a league of what have you done for me lately? And Alexei Protas has, taken his game to the next level. You take a look at it, it wasn't a slow build. It was, overnight. I guess what I'm going to say, going into this season, it was like the switch was flipped inside Alexei Protas, and he found his game. He was playing with confidence, and a lot of that confidence came from Spencer Carberry. And kind of the unsung hero of this season is Spencer Carberry. The history that that Spencer was the head coach of the Hershey Bears. Of course, Alexei playing down there as well. And I think that, you take a look at Spencer and how he utilized him. I think that the confidence that was bestowed in him is what made him believe that I can do this. That, he was given the opportunity to play on the first line. That, we've seen him on the second line. He was initially penciled in to be on the third line to start last season. That he took the responsibility that was given him, and he just really went with it. Is he a permanent top line role player? No, I guess I wouldn't say that. I think that Alex Ovechkin, to be honest with you, is the only guaranteed top line player. We've seen Strome. I think he would be the second guy. But, with that said, if the Capitals go out and take a big hack this summer, that could all change. It's Strome, it's PLD, and it's Nic Dowd. The third line is a question mark, but say the Capitals just really do take a big hack and they pick up a marquee center, then I think anything could change. I think that, Strome could bump down, PLD could bump down, that anything is possible. It's hard to look into a crystal ball, at the tail end of May going into June here, because we don't know what's going to happen. I think that a lot will be determined between now and July, that what kind of acquisitions are going to be made. But if you're asking me my hunch, I don't really see the Capitals making a tremendous hack. If you're thinking, Bennett, if you're thinking Mitch Marner, if you're thinking, fill in the blank marquee name that's out there, is it possible that the Capitals do that? For sure. But do I think it's likely? I don't think it's too likely. I think the Capitals have a really great ability to find, I hate to say reclamation projects, but kind of what they are. You take a look at PLD, and you take a look at the players that were brought in, historically, Brett Conley, Devontae Smith-Pelly, these guys that the Capitals kind of took a flyer on, and you've seen how their game grew with the Capitals. So I guess I don't know what kind of moves the Capitals have up their sleeves. I guess I wouldn't be too surprised if they make a big hack, but my hunch, if I'm my knee-jerk reaction, I don't think the Capitals are going to go out and make, one of those marquee acquisitions. So as far as Alexei Protas is concerned, I think that he will get the first crack at playing on the first line with Strome and Ovechkin, but anything is possible. What kind of Protas are we going to see out of camp? He is a guy that has consistently raised the bar as far as his play is concerned. I remember that when he first joined the team and he got his shot in camp, that it was a bit of a surprise that he broke camp with the team, but he played so well that the Capitals could not afford to send him down. Now, you didn't see a real great performance out of him right out of the gate. But what we saw this past season was his game really take off to the next level. So again, that's my take on Protas, is that he'll get the first crack at playing on the first line. It's ultimately kind of up to him, though, on how he plays. Marcus from Waldorf asks, could the Capitals trade a defenseman to improve the forward group? I think that that's possible. There is a bit of a logjam on defense with Carlson, Chychrun, Sandin, Roy, Fehérváry, and TVR. Fehérváry is young and could bring a real value. If the Capitals wanted to get real aggressive, I don't agree with that. I'm just talking about scenarios. TVR has been a team-friendly contract that might appeal to a playoff contender. Next season, I guess we don't know, but TVR actually played rather well with the Capitals. If the right forward becomes available, Chris Patrick could absolutely make a move. But I don't see that being the case. You ask, could the Capitals trade a defenseman to improve the forward group? Yes, they could. I don't necessarily think that they would do that. I've been surprised before. I think that, there's still questions on the blue line with John Carlson, being that he has 1 year left and it's kind of starting to see diminished returns on him, and the Capitals being non-committal on Carlson. To be honest with you, now this is kind of a hard take here, but I think if the Capitals were wise and they didn't have a plan of Carlson on the team in the long term, I think they would be wise to trade him while they can. And some people might say, are you crazy? John Carlson, what? Listen, I think the Capitals have gone down roads before where they've hung on to players for too long. Backstrom, Oshie, that they spent their last year under contract on the LTIR. If we had a do-over, would the Capitals have been better to trade Backstrom and Oshie while they could still get a return? Absolutely. But it would have been hard because, say you rewind 3 years ago when Backstrom and Oshie were still key pieces of this team, that it would have seemed absolutely crazy to trade them. But the Capitals would have got the most return trading Backstrom and trading Oshie while they were still great players. Bring that back to Carlson for a moment here. Still a good player. Think around the NHL. How many teams would be that much better with a John Carlson on their blue line? And if the Capitals have no master plans of bringing him back, wouldn't it be smarter to try to trade him and get some kind of return than to let him walk? Because, there's crazy things that could happen. Like I talked about Backstrom, Oshie, two players that in their heyday were amazing. Backstrom, the hip resurfacing thing. TJ Oshie, the Humpty Dumpty that you had to put together again after every game, that no one would touch them after that. So what lies ahead for John Carlson next season? What kind of diminished return would the Capitals get, say that he faced another substantial injury? Say he broke his leg or his hip or, whatever the case might be, whatever kind of crazy, Achilles, something substantial, that he would be diminished returns, and then his return would be lessened. So it's a difficult thing. I think the Capitals players, the fans, they like to hold on to players that are familiar. Like I talked about Backstrom, Oshie, that it would have been a crazy thought to talk about 3-4 years ago that maybe the Capitals should trade Backstrom or Oshie. You'd have got laughed out of the room. But hindsight 2020 might not have been the worst idea, that they could have got, a big player in return. In return, the Capitals got zero for Backstrom and Oshie, except for positive memories, I guess, at the end of the day. So you take a look at it. I think that might have been the wise idea for the Capitals. One last question really quick here. Finally, Angela from Falls Church wants to know, is this a playoff team or are they still in transition? Quickly to wrap it up here, I think that they are a playoff team that's in transition, if that's a thing. I think that there is still a really strong core, despite what I just said about Carlson, but there is a strong core of Ovechkin, Carlson, and Wilson. And a younger core the next wave, McMichael, Protas, these kind of guys that they're a part of the next wave that I think this team as is right now is good, but I still think they need to address and have a proven performer as far as a forward is concerned, a guy that has some playoff experience. If you could pluck a guy or two from the Florida Panthers, something of that nature, or, one of the intriguing free names out there that I've talked about this summer, that I think that would be the wise thing to do. I think it's important, not to hold on to these players because, we're familiar with them or they just make us feel a certain way. I think that the Capitals are a playoff team that's in transition. So I'm going to answer the question that way, that they are a playoff team in transition, a team that needs to be tweaked, a team that I think could use some tweaking on the blue line, for example, because you saw what happened when Martin Fehérváry went down. The Capitals didn't make any other move on the trade deadline other than bringing in Anthony Beauvillier. And guess what happened? When there's an emergency and you break glass, all that was in the cupboard for the Capitals on the blue line was Alex Alexiev. I mean, I guess there was ultimately, Ethan Bear and Dylan McElrath, but the guy that was standing in the front of the cupboard saying, "I'm front-faced, ready to sell," was Alex Alexiev. And that's not a good position to be in. So we talk all the time about that there is a glut of talent on the blue line. But at the end of the day, when that glass was broken and you pulled out the emergency piece, it was Alex Alexiev. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't really feel super confident about that. So I think the Capitals definitely need to make some moves. I don't think they need to, break it open and just do some crazy things. But a big hack, to use a term that was brought up in that presser, I think could be just what the doctor ordered, maybe just a jolt to help truly push this team over the top. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. If you would want your questions answered on the next mailbag edition, hit me up at minutecastmedia@gmail.com. That is minutecastmedia@gmail.com. And I'll answer your questions. It was a lot of fun getting those comments and questions from you. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi, and I'll talk to you again next time.